Good afternoon, everybody. This is your host, Zach, with the Bearded Federalist Show. Joining me today, we also have our two other hosts, Frost and Mark. Just a little warning for you guys. Mark is having some tooth pain and he is highly drugged at the moment. So if he says anything crazy, just know we may not agree. And yeah, so let's hope he still has his mind and he can educate some
The
of you.
opinions of Mark McKeithrin are solely the opinions of Mark McKeithrin and are in no way representative of the Bearded Federalist Show.
Exactly. I'll probably put a disclaimer in the intro.
And may
But
God have mercy on his soul.
yeah, but so this week, guys, there's been so much stuff that has happened. I guess it's just this Trump administration
Yep.
and just everything going on in the world. You know, a while back we were doing shows where we kind of just focused on like one topic because there's just so many people out there doing news podcast after news podcast where they just talk about the topics. And as much as I guess we tried to steer away from that, it's very hard because there's just so much going on. Everything is important. And so I guess for a little while, we may kind of be going back in that direction, just making sure you guys uh, essentially get to hear what's going on. And I'm glad Mark's back because, you know, as he's the, executive director of the New Federalist Alliance, I kind of want his take on some of these issues. And I guess that's where we're going to kind of differ is we're going to try and give you like the Federalist opinion or the Federalist approach to some of these issues going on. And then you have Frost and I, but I promise we're smart too. But
We just
Mark,
have a different opinion. We come from a different angle. That's it.
well, and I
Yeah.
think that's needed because there's a lot of people out there that are conservative, but they may not be fully where Mark is. They may still have a little of that populism, or they may actually like Trump. Um,
That's
and
the beautiful feature about conservatism itself is it's not a hive mind. Like
yeah,
we
exactly.
we champion different ideas because we want to test them. And so no, it's what makes it beautiful, what makes it work. The left, they can only operate under a hive mind. It's the only way they can function. You get on the plantation or you're done for. Conservatism, we are completely opposite like that. We embrace different ideas because we want to test them.
And
It was the
federalism.
whole reason for having, yeah, there's a whole reason
Federal.
for having
Yep.
multiple states so we can
Yep.
test them.
Yep.
Yep. But so I kind of put together an outline a few minutes ago of just topics for us to talk about today. And there were about 20 or so that I found online that
Yep.
just happened this week.
Busy week. Very busy
Yeah.
week. Everywhere across the
Ve-
world. Yeah.
exactly. And so I picked out 10. I don't know if we'll get to all 10 today. Um but yeah, let's dive right in. I think first we have Pope Francis. He's hospitalized. It kind of looks like he's in critical condition as of right now. So who knows? We may end up with a new pope here in the next few months.
So there's actually been a lot of talk about who's going to replace him as the next pope. And I'll have, and I'm not Catholic, so bear with me. I'm not Catholic, but they do that process. Some of these media outlets are like, oh, this is the guy that's going to replace him. Well, you don't know that. They have this whole all the cardinals get together and they vote, and they different smoke comes out of the castle or whatever. So I would stress to our viewers that one, he's not even dead yet, and two, that's not the correct process of how they elect a new pope, basically. So just when you start seeing other media outlets, saying, "Hey, this is the person," just calm down, don't freak out, it'll be okay.
Yeah, I always think it's interesting when they pick a new pope because every single I looked the other day at the, I guess, candidates to
Yeah.
become the new pope after Pope Francis, and the youngest one is 65.
Yeah.
And I think the oldest one was either 79 or 81. And it just it makes me wonder. I was like, why are popes so old? I get that there's wisdom in being pope, but I feel like there may need to be someone maybe just a little older. I think the youngest one I saw was 65. Um and I don't know, but then again, I'm not Catholic either, so I don't really know too much about Catholicism and, you know, the Pope and all that. But what do you think, Mark?
I was just looking up to see who the youngest one ever was, to see if, and they had a 20-year-old. Pope Benedict the Ninth was 20 years old
Yeah, but
when he took
how
over.
long ago was that?
That was
Yeah.
in
So
1032.
yeah,
Yeah,
so back then
1032.
that
Yeah,
was probably
wow.
like that's
Yeah.
probably like a 60 or 70-year-old now. Given that in 1776 we said that 35 is how old you have to be president because that's the you're wise at that age sort of thing.
I mean, twenty
So
20 years old and 1032. I mean, heck, at 5 years old, that's probably your midlife crisis right there,
Well,
you know.
yes and no. There's actually a kind of a little misnomer that goes around that. So usually when we talk about the average age people lived at certain times, and that was truly the average age, but it was the average age, not the normal age. And the reason it's so low is infant mortality was so high. You
Yeah.
Birth was only about 20% successful at best.
wow.
And so a lot of times they didn't even give kids names until their fifth birthday. Like that was a thing. If you lived to be 10 years old, you were likely to have a normal full life, kind of like what we experience today. Not quite as long, but you'd be in your 60s and 70s if you lived to 10. But getting to that age was rare, just because you're most vulnerable as a child.
Yeah.
And,
Now we
yep.
have
So it was
presidents in their 80s and yeah.
popes in their almost 90s. But
Yep.
yeah, I think that's exactly what they look for is someone that's old, someone that's experienced, someone that's wise, someone that's been a cardinal for a while, that served in that capacity for a while. And just to get to be a cardinal takes a while. And
Well,
so,
I'm gonna try to keep us all on track today. So I'm gonna move on to the next one. So it was mentioned to us that the U.S. has made a preliminary agreement with Turkey to purchase 15,000 tons of eggs. So I did do some research. I did do some research on. I did do some research on egg prices. So we're still here in the free state of Florida. We're sitting at 350 a dozen. Some of
Bruh.
the yeah, that's cheap though. That's compared to what I'm about to tell you about Washington. Washington apparently has $10 an egg. So what's the difference between Florida and Washington? I'll ask our viewers, what's the difference between Florida and Washington? Well, the difference is one's red and one's blue. So
mhm.
if you're paying higher prices, oh my goodness, don't get me started on the housing, what should be the housing crisis in Oregon. Blue states are just overpriced. They're overpriced garbage, and that's my opinion.
Yeah. I agree. See, I
Just
don't notice eggs too often because I mean, I'll buy a dozen eggs here and there. But my family goes to the grocery store what feels like every other day. Like it's always, hey, we need to go to Publix or Kroger. We need this, for our son. And so we're constantly buying fruit because if you have a toddler or you buy fruit a lot, it's only good for a few days. Or, if your kids eat it, then you got to go buy more. And so we literally just went to Publix this morning and we didn't get that much. And we didn't even get eggs. And it was $103.
mm,
And so it's just ridiculous. But, it's one of those kind of like necessities. And so I notice it, but at the same time, I'm not going to not get eggs or anything I don't need because of the price. It's like gas. I got to have it.
Yep, gotta
So
have it. You're gonna pay for it. Mark, you have a pretty large family. Do you have any input on eggs, or are you a lot like me? Are you a lot like me? That was a joke, by the way. You guys can laugh. Are you a lot like me? My wife does do a significant amount of the grocery shopping. I'm not gonna lie. She takes care of me. I'm a big baby. Or are you the grocery shopper for the family?
Yeah, I usually run the errands, but yeah, so I see those. But my wife does the budgeting and sees those expenses as well. So we both bear that pain. We're not fundamental egg activists at this point, but um, there's a lot going on with how produce is handled in our nation, the expenses that government intervention has caused in that itself. Um, just the various subsidies that go into the farming, how those are managed, how those are mismanaged. It's a big wide thing. Another attribute of why DC would spend so much more than Florida. Florida has farmland, DC doesn't. That, but I mean, these are all different kind of components that fall into that. But it's no mistake that government intervention through Democrat policies, which is their favorite thing to do, to play with the markets, um, that has a direct impact on what's going on.
Yeah.
I would prefer to see Trump work that angle and fix our agricultural issues and tackle those than
Yeah.
to buy some millions of eggs from Turkey. I like turkey eggs, but uh, but from Turkey, we'll see. Um, yeah, that seems so ridiculous, doesn't it? Just on its face, like how are we getting eggs shipped from across the ocean? They're gonna be days old by the time they even hit our stores, and we can't fix the problem at home. That it seems silly.
yeah, I
But
mean,
hey, if he's got to do what he's got to do in order to buy time to fix this stuff, I get that.
talk about
But
green eggs and turkey.
No. So
oh,
I would stress to our viewers to investigate farmers markets and try to buy direct from farmers. That would be one, you're going
oh
to get a
yeah.
cheaper price. Two, it's going to be clean of any garbage that a grocery store will require, which will lead us into our next topic. Investigation on Robert F. Kennedy Jr. In the risk and rise of violence with antidepressants. So I did do a little bit of research on this over the last week. I don't take any antidepressants, but apparently it is a very high probability with a SSRI, serotonin something reuptake inhibitor, whatever they are. The SSRIs apparently has a direct correlation with, well, violence in general, but school shootings apparently antidepressants are a direct correlation. Now, and just I'm gonna give the facts of science here. We're all three scientists on this show, and it could be that those that need the SSRIs are prone to violence, and it's not the SSRIs that are making them violent. Okay, so I want
Correlation does not imply causation.
correct.
Yep.
Correlation and causation. That's right. So, I just want to put the facts out there before I go and spew conspiracy theories that the left are going to twist day and night. Either one of you two have input on SSRIs and violence?
Well, I haven't dug as deep as you have into that issue, but I will say I think a lot of it can be linked to food and the chemicals that are placed in food. So that's why I'm really happy that RFK Jr. is in there. You know, when he was, I guess, first tapped to be health secretary, I just kept hearing all of this negative stuff about RFK, especially when it comes down to certain stances that he has. And I'm like, well, obviously, I want those questions answered. Like, will it impact the job that he has? For instance, the abortion issue. As long as he says, I'm going to abide by the administration's ruling, that's all I wanted to hear. But I was very excited that he was confirmed, because as a parent who gives their kid dye free foods, we have definitely noticed a difference in our son's behavior. And I've noticed there's a lot of parents out there that give their kids dyes or um, high fructose corn syrup in just about everything they eat. And it's just behavioral differences between, their kid and my kid. And it's like just night and day. And, those kids grow up and they get ADD, ADHD. They have all of these other things mentally that are going on inside their bodies. And I think we're in a society now where we just try and give people medications to fix symptoms,
Yep.
instead of we treat the symptoms and not the root cause. And so I can't tell you, and Frost knows this because he's known me for, I think 11 or 12 years now. And I've dated a lot of crazy women, and just about every single one of them that were just crazy, they were all on like antidepressants, or they had anxiety of some kind. And I mean, that's a pretty high percentage, when it comes down to it. And I don't think that they needed those medicines. I think they needed help, obviously, in some way, but those medicines just have side effects that just, they may fix one issue but cause another. And so I think that, you know, he need I'm sure he will investigate antidepressants, but get to the root cause and not just treat the symptoms.
So, Mark, I have a question for you. If you want to bring out your rights and Constitution brain out for a minute. Zach has mentioned a couple of times on this show and on previous episodes about dyes specifically. I have even begun removing dyes from my diet altogether. I even caught my heartburn medication had red 40 in it. So I removed that. I got a dye-free heartburn medication now. So my question to you is: at what point is RFK stepping over the bounds? If there's scientific fact for these dyes, say, hey, these do cause these types of things, and there's scientific research that can back that. But say, Coke is not allowed to have any more than 20 grams of sugar per can. Like, at what point is it going too far? And you have to give the American
So
person a choice of what they're drinking. You could require Coke to have high if they have high fructose corn syrup in their Coke. They also must provide a sugar only, a natural sugar only Coca Cola.
right, right. So there's a two different ways we can approach from that. So one, you have the extreme libertarian view, which is we want the government to do the research. We want them to look into these things and find out the truth, and then they want them to publish the truth.
Mm.
But then they want the American citizens to have the freedom to make their choices based on that information.
Which is
They
where
don't
I
want the
am.
government to. They don't want the government to make rules or policies that tells them what they have to do.
Mm.
Then you have more of the authoritarian side of things, um, where they say, well, government's role is to protect us, and it is to safeguard us from things that we do not have the ability to do that with. And so they would say the average ignorance of most Americans to not read those things, not have the time to read those things, or even the education and understanding to comprehend what they're reading necessitates the government to step in and create policy. As for RFK specifically, uh, thanks to the overturning of Chevron, there's not a lot he can do policy wise that is enforcement. Like he can't create new law.
Right.
It's going to require Congress to do that. He can provide Congress with the research and the study and the evidence, and they can create the law, and then the president can enforce it. And so that would be the proper role there to create the policy that way. But I kind of fall in that middle area myself, where um, I want I want the maximum amount of choice to be to the citizens,
Right.
but I want the government to do their due diligence in doing the research, doing the studies, and publishing the information transparently. And that's always been hard to do because of all the special interests that are involved in government. And so
Right.
they're going to weasel their way in and try to manipulate those studies. And so we need someone that can
Yep.
stand up to them, fend them off, and help us find the truth. Um, if RFK Jr. can do that, he will be legendary.
Yep. So
Yeah.
discussing individual rights, I think we got to move on to the next topic here. Zach, did you have something to say?
No, no, no. I was actually going to tie that into what you were probably about to, and that's U.S. banning trans people in the military. And obviously, you both are veterans. I'm not, unless we're counting Call of Duty. I served a few years with my crew on Xbox Live, but that's neither here nor there. But I think this is a good thing because, for one, people that are trans are on medication the rest of their life. And I think that everything needs to be as uniform as possible in the military.
Yep.
I mean, you know, the military should not be paying for your transition meds. They shouldn't be paying for counseling. They shouldn't be paying for, anything else that comes through this.
Yep.
You're either male or female.
Yep.
There's no in between. It's too controversial of an issue, and something tells me if you care more about yourself, your pronouns than the war fighter,
Yep.
then sorry, you don't need to be in the military. Go get
Yep.
a contracting job or a federal job doing something.
So I think we're on the same page with this one. So my personal opinion, provided my military career as a backdrop for this, you don't really have rights when you're in the military. You do as you're told. They say jump, you say how high. You say yes sir, no sir, yes ma'am, no ma'am, yes sergeant, no sergeant, whatever their rank is. You do as you're told. If you can't pick up a firearm and go fight for this country, you do not belong in the armed services. Period. Full stop. Point blank. End of discussion. So, some of the females that are watching the show might be, oh well, what if we get pregnant? Okay, well, I think you can definitely be pregnant and be in uniform. It's not permanent. It's not lifelong. It's a 9-month thing, and then you can pick up a firearm and go fight for our country. It's perfectly fine. That's not what I'm saying. I am under the personal opinion that women do not belong in combat because women are significantly more precious than men. Just provided our human nature, females are just more important. They're more precious than a man. And that's the stance that I will take on women in combat. And I'm sure Mark has a lot to say about this one as well.
So first, the trans issue. So let's start if what the president's powers are with that, what the administration's power with that. What a lot of people don't know about when you enlist in the military is you actually step outside of the protections of the Constitution itself.
Mm-hmm.
You now fall under an entirely different legal code. It's the UCMJ,
USMJ.
Uniform Code of Military Justice.
Yep.
Means you do not have things like First Amendment rights. Like you cannot say what you want to say. They control your speech. You can't go wherever you want to go. They limit where you like when you were on base back home. There are frequent times where like you cannot go more than 30 miles away. You need to be able to be back here within 1 hour, et cetera, et cetera. So um, there's a lot of things that are very different for soldiers that are serving in the military than there are for civilians that fall under the Constitution. So, for one, you're outside of that. So, when we try to apply constitutional protections and principles and values to what happens in the military, you're not talking apples to apples. There are very similar things. The military does have protections for speech. They do have protections for travel. They do have protections for expression and things like that. But it's very controlled.
Mm.
Um, and so with the trans issue there, the big issue one it cracks me up is Democrats and even a lot on the right are like we need to cut the spending to the federal government. Like we need to cut this. And the military is a big spender. The left loves to cut spending to the military, but then they want to add trans. And
Yep.
the expense, the magnitude of expense that entails alone is through the roof. Just to support these people and care for them and provide them the medication, the treatments that they need, the special counseling. They have a high rate of depression and suicide, some of the highest in all of any segment in America. Um, and so you add that to military veterans already having a high rate of suicide. It's inhumane on many levels. And what you are asking the military to do really puts a lot of resources and effort to weaken them for a really for no benefit. And really, what we need when we are looking at the military is cost benefit analysis across the board. Does this make us stronger? Does this cost too much for what we get out of it? And adding the trans social experiment to the military is unaffordable, is reckless, and only makes America weaker.
Speaking of cost benefit analysis, what do you guys, Zach? What's your input on this new Delta airline crash where they offered $30,000 to each passenger? Uh, what was it? What was it reported as? Um, uh, no strings attached. Just 30.
S-
Here's $30,000.
well, there's definitely strings attached. So, um, I don't know all of the details of that $30,000, but I will say that that was completely pilot error. I think anyone who watches that video will, be able to tell that, when you're coming down at a high speed, you don't just come down, you have to flare up
Yep.
and land, or else, obviously the landing gear snapped, took out the right wing, and it ended up going upside down. And I think only two people were critically injured, which is, a miracle. But I think they're trying to give out $30,000 per passenger because once they accept that money, they're not going to be able to sue. And
That's it right there.
and that's it. Like I think if uh, I'm not sure, it'll probably be one person on that flight doesn't take the money and they end up suing Delta over
It's
that,
going to be a lot of
and
money.
they're going to be in a whole lot of trouble.
Yep.
Um, Looking
Well, it
back,
gets more complicated. Like
yeah,
anyone that's seen Landman, have you guys watched that show?
Mm-mm.
yes,
Landman with Billy Bob Thornton. So yeah, you know where we're going. So it's just okay. We're
hmm,
on the same page here. One of the caveats that insurance companies like to throw uh, at victims and family members here when this kind of stuff happens is they lump it in. We'll give you this $30,000, but if you reject it and try to sue us, we are holding back the $30,000 for all those other people. So now all of them want after you. And so it's additional pressure. It's dirty what they're doing. It's absolutely dirty.
Yeah, and I mean that, I could easily solve that. I would just call up the nearest news station, be like, "Hey, this is what they're trying to do. I
Yep.
have the scoop of a lifetime for you.
Yep. Yep.
They're they're coming after me because I'm trying to hold them accountable."
Yep.
And
Hmm.
but, sometimes people don't think like that. And people think of, "Oh, that'll take too long. I could use this $30,000 right now." But
Yep.
yeah, but then again, if they do that and they just throw money at the issue and they don't fix the actual problems, then it's just going to happen again. And I hate to say it, there's been so many aviation disasters in the past month, and I'm not sure you can't blame Trump for all of them, and you definitely I don't think even DEI is to blame for all of it, because that one, granted, it was pilot error, um, but again, there was another one in Arizona a few days ago where two people collided. I don't know the backstory on that one, but at a certain point, the FAA employs, I think, around 45,000 people or so, and I'm fairly certain they only got rid of 400 people or so, across the board. That was like the DEI firing. So I mean, it's less than a percent of every
Well,
like.
keep in mind that the DEI problem isn't because Trump fired FAA employees. The DEI problem is that they could not hire FAA employees to meet their quota because of DEI. There's a whole bunch of white people
Oh yeah.
apparently that wanted to be that had experience or whatever, met the requirements of being air traffic controller, and they couldn't hire them because of the DEI. So I just want to make sure our
Well,
viewers understand
and,
that.
and I hate to say it, DEI has been around for a lot longer than people think. They think
Well,
it's just been around the past few years.
EEOC laws are basically the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, because so my dad, he he worked at Boeing, well, still kind of does, and a long time ago he used to work for another company, and they had his resume and another guy's resume. My dad had more experience, more internships, and ultimately was the better candidate for the job. But the other guy was a different race. And they basically told my dad, they were like, "Hey, we can't hire you because we have to hire this other guy." Now that's a whole different HR, nightmare, because obviously you don't ever say something like that to someone because they could turn around and sue you. But he's like, "If you ever bring this up, I'll deny it. But just to let you know, you were the more qualified person, but this person met the, I guess, quota we have to have." And
Well, look at
yeah,
Boeing today.
yeah, well, yeah,
It worked
yeah,
out real great for
Yep.
him. So
yeah.
that's all I got to
So we
say.
have
Boeing's definitely had their issues.
so we usually have each year between 30 and 60 sizable aircraft crashes every year. So this is really kind of still the same pace. Like if we think about 3 or 4 a month, and you expand that over the course of a year, you're still on the same pace. Um, so we're not getting so much more accidents right now. Actually, this is lower, 3 or 4 in a month versus 5 or 6, which gives you the 60. Um, so we're actually kind of going in a better direction right now. Fewer of those. We have 120 fatal car accidents every day.
Yeah.
44,000 people are killed in car accidents every year. Um, and so this is still an incredibly safe way to travel. And unfortunately, the real bummer crux of all of this is each one of these accidents makes us safer. Um, and that's the annoying thing. The NTSB investigates these accidents. They find out all the little details that led up to it, and then they create different regulation rules and processes to avoid those for everyone else. And so each of these accidents makes the next flight safer.
Yep.
And so while it's tragic and it's horrible what we're seeing, it's not outside the scope of what always happens. It's getting a lot of media attention right now. I'm getting a lot of media attention, but yeah, it's pretty much par for the course. And fortunately, we're getting like the fact that these people were able to walk away from this crash shows you just how much better the aircraft themselves are being built.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Um, I mean, that thing smashed into the ground over 100 some odd miles an hour, right? And people walked away. You couldn't do that in a car.
Yeah.
And so it's amazing.
Yeah, definitely not. I guess moving on, what do you guys think about Trump firing 15,000 IRS employees?
Uh, oh, 15,000 IRS employees. Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
I would like them to just go ahead and delete the whole. If there are three-letter bureaus or government agencies that are unneeded, the IRS is definitely one of them. Just delete it. Just delete. Just everyone go home. They're all FBI agents. They can all go. They can all move over to the FBI anyway, and they can help with getting these illegals out of our country. Um, you should be able to automate everything in the IRS if you're going to continue paying taxes. Um, I mean, it sucks that people are losing their job. At the end of the day, Republicans and Democrats, left, right, front, center, doesn't matter where you sit in the aisle. People losing their jobs is bad. We don't want to see that. But if I mean, you either have to let people have a job that don't deserve a job or are not needed, or cut the federal budget. Which one is it? I'm going to cut the federal budget. I'm sorry. Sorry. Bye.
Yeah.
So did you
Well,
guys ever see that interview? This was like back in the 90s or so, um, of Milton Friedman. And he was asked, out of all of the agencies that are in the government, which ones would you um, keep, essentially? Like, which ones would you keep and which ones should the US government just get rid of completely? And he basically said, we need the Department of Justice, we need the Department of Defense, and we need the Department of Treasury. He said there was like one other one that he had. Um, like he argued against the Department of Education or so. But he
he
said,
wanted the Department of State.
yeah, and the Department of State. And then there was like one other one that he said we could keep part of it and maybe roll it into um, another agency. But that's like four out of what, the 12 or 14 agencies that we have. I
Hmm.
would love to see that go back. Obviously, it wouldn't happen because of Congress and, trying to pass anything through Congress that isn't useless is just, it's not going to happen. Instead, we get
Yeah.
stuff like
So we
adding
had a,
Trump to Mount Rushmore, things that are
oh,
just
God.
idiotic.
Waste of money.
Yep.
Yep. So we had, we all lost our minds back when Biden added 87,000 new hires to the IRS under the law enforcement component of it. 87,000 added there just to do that duty. We don't want the IRS doing law enforcement. That's the improper role for them entirely. As long as we have the 16th Amendment, we're probably going to have the IRS. We're probably going to stuck with it as long as we're stuck under the 16th. If we can get rid of that, we could probably get rid of the IRS. But we don't want them doing law enforcement. We don't want them enforcing that at
No,
all
but they can
whatsoever.
move to the FBI and then be law enforcement, correct?
Yes.
What
So
purpose?
Biden added 87,000. Trump moving 15,000 is just scratching the surface. And so, like, I'm all for this downsizing, especially if they're identified as just excess. We need to do that. It's irresponsible to the taxpayer. Yes, people lose jobs. Yes, that sucks for them. Yes, it's terrible. But the federal government has a duty to the taxpayer, and it's not to employ people.
Yeah, I will say this, and this will end up tying us into our next topic, mainly because what we have all of these IRS employees, and it's taking forever to just get taxes back. You know, it when they take your money, they'll do it as fast as
Oh
possible,
yeah.
but when they're giving you money back, then it takes 3 to 4 weeks, even if you're one of the first people to file them, and they have all these months to do it, and so I think, um, these whole federal employee emails that just went out, it's kind of a mixed bag for me because on one hand, I feel like it's definitely an overreach. I don't think Elon has any authority, other than maybe bringing attention to. But also, as someone who works with government every day, I typically have to give, you know, update emails, maybe not weekly, but definitely at the end of the month because, there's some weeks where uh, things that we test are running behind because of software and everything else. So we can't exactly get things done, or we're having to, have meetings with other government
Mhm.
officials. And so it may not get done in that week, but we still have stuff to do. And sending an email that's just 5 bullet points of this is what I did this week. And I feel like if you can't do that, you know, why are you here? My cousin, he
Yep.
literally told me the other day, he's like, yeah, I've literally if I was looking to fire someone, I typically start sending out those emails. And yeah,
Mhm.
I think it'll definitely help trim some fat, but there's definitely gonna be a lot of pushback on it, and so
So so I don't work in the federal. I'm not a federal employee. I work as a civilian, but I'd like to point out that I have a meeting every single week with my boss. And it's been like this with every job that I've ever had. Each week I have a meeting with my boss since I graduated from college and I got my first engineering job. And I have to give what I did last week, what I'm doing this week, and what is probably going to be on my list for the following week. So
Mhm.
it doesn't necessarily have to be 5 bullet points, but typically it's three to five in each category. So if you can at least do that, and I'm gonna use Zach's sort of impression here. If you can't do that, are you even an employee?
yeah, because
Tell
I
me
mean
two things in each category. What did you do last week?
Mhm.
What
yeah,
did you do this
because
week? What are you gonna do next week?
I literally, at my job, we have an 8:30 meeting every single day. We go
Yep.
around, say updates, and
Yep.
then they
Yep.
go around the room and they literally ask, "What are you working on today?" And I can't think of a time where anyone has been like, "I don't have anything to do." And if
Your
they
very
do
first day. Your very
it
first day.
not even that, because 'cause you're doing trainings and there's a lot to do,
Oh, fair.
the first
Okay.
few weeks, but it's more so if you have nothing to do, that's like, you better get ready because 'cause you're gonna get a bunch of tasks that people need you to do.
So here's where the pushback on that is coming from, though. So we all do that, right? And we do that up our chain, and our bosses do the same to their bosses, right? And then ultimately, those in charge of the contracts for our companies, they have to provide the same kind of feedback to the government who's paying our contracts, right?
Mhm.
And then that government official has to do the same kind of thing up the chain to those that approve the contracts that they've bought, right? So it keeps going up and up and up. The pushback is that Doge is requiring everyone report to Doge, those emails,
Mhm.
not to their employers. And so imagine, you know, you guys and myself having to send a email over to somebody in the Health and Human Services about what I'm doing in cybersecurity for missile defense. Um, right? That doesn't make any sense. It's extra work for me to do. It takes time out of the day for me to do that, and is not going uh, to those that are responsible for this. What needs to happen is Doge needs to not have that be done by the lower level workers, but the department heads need to
And
consolidate that feedback and give that to Doge.
yeah, and so I don't know if you guys heard this, but Kash Patel actually sent out an email to FBI employees not to reply,
Told them not to participate. Yep.
and basically saying, "Hey, we'll handle this on our own." But yeah, and so I was kind of surprised by that, and I was sitting here thinking, I was like, "Okay,
Well,
Cash,
well, yeah, he has to. He
yeah,
almost has to, because what does the FBI do? Investigations. You can't have lower level people reporting to Doge on investigations.
yeah."
Like that's going to be a problem.
They're reporting to big balls over there.
There you go.
Speaking of big balls, tell me about this KFC move
Oh, we
there.
doing KFC next. All
Yeah.
right, yeah. KFC is apparently moving their location to Texas. Um, I'm assuming it's probably because of tax benefits and all of that, but it's going to be weird because Kentucky Fried Chicken moving from Kentucky to Texas. Are they going to change their name?
Are they going to give bigger buckets? Everything's bigger in Texas. Is it going to get bigger?
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know. I didn't really even have too much to talk about this subject other than I haven't heard anything or anyone talking about it, and I think it's kind of a big deal because I mean, I like KFC, but it's gonna be weird going to
Yeah.
KFC when it's technically TFC, you know?
Well, not necessarily. So, all right. Here's the problem. I'm gonna call you Southern boys out. So, in Alabama, so in the South, what's the big battle we have with the other
Barbecue.
Southern states? Who
Barbecue.
makes the best barbecue,
That's
right?
right.
North Carolina barbecue is not the same thing as Texas barbecue. It's not the same thing as Louisiana barbecue. It's not the same thing as Alabama barbecue. But Alabama barbecue is made in North Carolina, and North Carolina barbecue is made here in Alabama. It doesn't change where it came from, or what makes it it. So KFC will still be KFC. But the important thing to notice is, when you're moving from one state to another, there's a reason. There is a very good reason, and it's always, every single time, economic.
Mm.
Um, and so Kentucky, they've got a Democrat governor. He's got a way he's running his government there and running that state. Um, and KFC is weighing those options and saying we can be much more profitable and do the due diligence to our shareholders if we relocate to Texas. And so it's just a bigger sign that conservatism wins every time. You will get the business if you are a conservative state. And so that's what that comes down to.
We should get TJ to write a Save KFC bill,
That would be
For
hilarious.
Kentucky
Yeah.
because I mean, hell, he writes a bill on just about everything else. If you guys don't know, TJ
Yeah.
Roberts, today's his birthday,
He's
actually.
awesome.
He's he's going to be like one of the next. If I would say if Thomas Massey runs for Senate, I would want TJ Roberts in to replace him.
Yeah.
He'll be humble and say, "Oh, there's other people who would do a much better job." The dude just writes bills and just introduces them in Kentucky's legislature. Like, I think he has like 72 bills written, and he's just waiting to introduce them. And
Yeah.
yeah, the man's awesome.
A workhorse.
Yep,
Yep.
and
That's
that's
what
what
you
that's
want
what we
in a
need.
worker. Yeah.
But yeah, and so speaking of money, Doge has apparently saved $100 billion. I don't know the exact number off the top of my head.
Yeah,
Frost, you probably know.
128 billion as of this morning.
128 billion, and apparently they want to send everybody $5,000 checks.
Yeah.
Uh,
So
I'm not a fan of that.
I have a huge opinion on this $5,000 check thing. So I was watching Fox News. All right, okay, all right. Just put your pistols away. Don't shoot me, okay? I was watching Fox News, and some of these right wing economists are saying that it wouldn't necessarily be inflationary. Those
it will
same
be.
economists, but on the left, were just telling us that inflation was transitory. There's, there,
Yep.
no, absolutely not. Yes, it will be inflationary. My personal opinion is they should pay off the debt, or they should give the American people a huge tax break. Tax paying citizens should get a break. Not everyone should get a break. My opinion.
Agreed. Yeah. And that's also just common sense. I hate when people are like, "Oh, everyone should get this." I'm like, if you don't pay your taxes, you should not be getting any of this money
Right.
back because
I
it's
agree.
not your money. And I'm one of
But
those
also,
people that even illegal immigrants that are in the country and pay taxes, I still don't know how you pay taxes if you're an illegal immigrant and not get deported. But, that's just me.
when you buy things, the
Yeah.
sales tax.
But I think if you're people that pay taxes, they maybe need to go at the top of the list up to being legalized. That's my opinion. Not everyone holds that opinion. I still think illegals should be deported and come back legally. But at the end of the day, I don't want Americans to keep paying for people that aren't American, whether that comes down to
Hmm.
foreign aid or whether it comes down to people that just aren't contributing to society and collecting a paycheck from the US taxpayers. And
Yep.
yeah,
Well,
Yep.
I also want to push back a little bit on this concept of Doge has saved us X amount of dollars.
I know where you're
Uh,
going with this.
Doge has
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Doge has identified fraud, waste, and abuse. We need them to keep doing that. We need them to keep identifying it. But unless Congress acts, they haven't saved us a penny. This is not money that is like we were just discussing now. It's not been paid. It's not been sent to pay back the debt.
Yep.
It is money that has been taken from taxpayers. It has been allocated, so it has already been spent into these areas. Identifying them does not take that back. So even when you cut these jobs and positions, that money was already allocated and spent. Right? It didn't end up in their pocket, but it was given to that branch for payroll, that uh, agency for payroll, right? And so they still have control of that money, even though it's identified. And even those that are returned back to the Treasury are just turned back to the Treasury's general fund. It's not being spent to do anything for the states, for the taxpayers, or the deficit or the debt. And those are the four areas that money needs. That's who owns that. That's where that needs to go. And so, unless Congress acts, Doge has not saved a penny. It has identified the issues here, and they need to keep doing that. I like that they're playing with ideas of what to do with all the stuff they're finding. I think that's an important discussion they need to have. Throw those ideas out there. Should we give taxpayers $5,000 back? No, but have the conversation. Um, should we pay off deficit? Reasonable thing to do. Should we pay off debt? Reasonable thing to do. Should we transfer it to another agency, like the military or other things like that? So, what should we do with that? It's the conversation that we need to be having. I, for one, want to see it go towards the debt. I think that will help the most. If we're not going to pay towards the debt, then let's work on paying off bonds, which have high interest rates and are what's hurting the deficit. When you understand how the deficit works and
Hmm.
who owns that deficit and how
China.
much of that in interest that we pay every year, If we can take care of those bonds and lower that interest, that would be a huge win for America too. Um, and that would parlay into the next round of taxes. So the taxes we pay going forward would be less because of that. Um, and so that would be how that could come back. Putting cash back into the economy with a flood like that is the same thing we did during COVID, and you're going to get the same results. These are higher checks than what were sent back then.
Hmm.
And so you're going to have more inflation. And so, yeah, it would be a terrible idea, I think, to do that. But I like that the conversation's having. But people need to know you need to put pressure on your representatives to act. You need to get on them to start passing legislation, financial legislation, to address everything that Doge is digging up. They're fighting this stuff. They can't do anything about it, though. It's only Congress that can, and we have to pressure Congress to act.
Yeah, and that is literally why elections are so important, and why we can't just keep sending all of these, politicians to
Hmm.
Washington that are just going to introduce legislation that have nothing to do with America or America's needs. I
Yep.
read this week that Randy Fine, who I can't stand, one of his first acts that he wants to pass in Congress is identifying Israel as Judea, Samaria, like basically disregarding Palestine altogether. And while I may agree with that on some level, what does that have to do with America's needs? It doesn't.
Yeah.
That's
And
called
it
politics, Zach. It's called
I
politics.
know, and I can't stand it. What I can't stand is Americans who think, "Oh, this guy's gonna be a fighter. He's gonna fight for you." And then they get in and they do absolutely nothing, and Americans don't even learn their lesson. They reelect the person.
Yep.
And it's like, "What are you doing?"
So check
People
this out.
don't.
Here's one real world thing that we got going on now with this administration and with all the money they're finding. Okay, I love that Cash Patel wants to decentralize the FBI. That's beautiful. DeSantis talked about that too, right? So we want to scatter them out so you don't have this hive mind taking place in one location.
Which is
So,
what he's
for example, we
doing.
live. Yep, we live in North Alabama. Zach and I live North Alabama. You got Huntsville there, and there's a giant FBI office that's there, regional department there, and Cash Patel is sending 500 uh, FBI agents to this area. He's decentralizing, moving them here. But what they're not thinking about though is that's 500 agents plus their spouses and their kids. That's 500 new homes that are needed in an area that is already in a massive housing deficit. That is 500 plus maybe 1,000 or more because most families have more than one kid. Kids going into the school systems here, and so it becomes a heavy burden on the community when you start doing things like that. The rest of the community has to absorb that. So if we're finding all these fraud, waste, and abuse resources, and we want to uh, decentralize agencies like this, pour some of that funding into that. Pour it back into the communities that we're moving these agents to and these organizations to. Help support those schools and the communities that are there. So that's
A
that's
lot of
something
it
they have
has
to
to
consider.
do with, I see a lot less houses being built in North Alabama, and just more and more, if it's not a bank, a Dollar General, or an apartment complex, it's probably not being
Yeah.
built. And
Yep.
I just wish, because I want to move in the next, few years, but it's kind of hard to do that because it's easy to sell a house, but to buy a house is, very difficult.
Oh yeah.
But
So I'd like
unless
to
you're
get to this.
Frost.
Yeah, wow. Well, yeah, unless you're me. But I'd like to get to the last topic because I think this one's going to before we you give us a weekly recap and all that stuff before we end the show. I'd like to get to this last topic about Cynthia Ervo playing Jesus Christ in this new Jesus Christ production.
Superstar.
So
Yep.
I will say that my wife did drag me to the movie theater, and we did watch Wicked, and I thought that Cynthia and Ariana Grande, they have beautiful musical talent. I think that they can sing. I mean, well done.
I mean, they can act too.
Yeah,
Like,
it's that was a pretty good production, and I don't like musicals at all, and I would like to give them, big thumbs up. They have great voices.
yeah.
As for her playing Jesus Christ, I think she should probably let's just talk about it. No politics here. Let's just talk about what happens to people in Hollywood that play Jesus Christ or produce things about Jesus Christ. Um, Cue Mel Gibson. So Mel Gibson has pretty much ruined his career after Passion of the Christ. And it just doesn't seem to ever. I don't think he's ever. I've watched a couple of his low budget movies because he can't get any backing or funding. So on a professional level, I would probably tell Cynthia to go ahead and decline that role. As a Christian, I'm deeply offended. That
So do you
Go
guys know
ahead.
the history of that show, the Jesus Christ Superstar show, and the
No, and
history behind it?
I don't think I really care, to be honest.
Not
But
the
go ahead.
history. I've listened
So
to the soundtrack before, but that's about
so
it.
it came out in the 90s. Like this production was originally produced in the 90s. And when it first came out, it was a whole lot of hoopla over it then because it was a story about a gay Jesus. The main character, the main story was what if Jesus was gay and went through it. So from the very start, this whole show is wokeism through the roof. And it's not meant to tell it's not meant to actually tell a biblical story at all, ever
It's
in the
Oh,
it's
oh
history
not
yeah,
of this
Christianity.
yeah,
production.
yeah. Because I
In the history
remember
of this production,
I
it's
remember
never been
seeing
that way.
stuff before, and it's just all these rainbows and everything. So I knew that. My main thing is, well, how do we make this more woke and more gay? Well, you have to add
Yep.
a woman of color, and that's
Yep.
essentially how you do it. That's the equation nowadays. But
Yep.
It's awful.
yeah, and
So weekly recaps.
yeah,
Uh,
weekly
Zach,
recaps.
what's going on with you?
Well, so on my front, as many of you know, my wife got into a wreck about it'll be 2 weeks tomorrow, and we've just been dealing with just inconvenience after inconvenience. So, Madison police has still not filed the police report. They're supposed to do it within like a week or so. And of course, when we talk, we've called up there multiple times, and my wife talked to the supervisor and everything, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we've just been so swamped." And then they started talking about like I guess softball or whatever. I don't know if the police have like a softball game coming up or whatever. And I'm like, "You're thankful I was not on that call because I'm sitting here thinking, why is softball taking priority over your job?" Like, and of
That's wild.
course, yeah, and of course, you know, we've turned the car in to get it fixed, and we have a rental van. I don't like Chrysler minivans, and so we're having to deal with that. But we only have the van for 30 days, and it's going to take like 3 weeks longer than originally planned because apparently they can only work on the car 4 hours a day, and there's like 90 hours of work or so to do. And so it's going to take like, I think right now it's like April 2nd or something when it's projected to be done. And
That's ridiculous.
it's annoying me because it's like, well, insurance isn't going to pay past 30 days. And as of right now, the insurance on the other person's insurance on the form is not valid. Like, we called and they said, "Oh yeah, this person's policy ended a few months ago." And so I'm like, "Okay, do they not have insurance or did they change insurance companies?" Well, we can't really get in touch with them because the police report isn't out yet. And so, of course, we've had to turn to a lawyer because if it turns out these people don't have insurance, we're out, $1,000 or so just paying for a rental car for an extra few weeks. Then we're out money because of all the deductibles that we're paying. And then, not to mention, we're leasing this vehicle. And so, if we turn around to buy it, you have to factor in the depreciation of the vehicle now that it's been in, an accident. And so we've just been dealing with that, and it's just been annoying to say the least. Um,
That's rough.
but yeah, other than that, it's been pretty good, I would say.
Yep. Well,
What about you guys?
on a positive note, I'd like to tell our viewers that the Caldwell Show is now officially up and running. Episode 1 has officially been recorded and edited. Yes, I'm very
Yeah.
proud of that. I know I promised it like a month ago, but we're going to try to hit the ground running. We're going to try to get 1 to 2 episodes in. They're going to be short episodes, probably 15, 20 minutes, no more than 30 minutes long. So I'll be able to keep your attention. So there's a positive for the Bearded Federalist Show and presenting the next best thing that we have here. What about you, Mark?
Yeah.
How was your week?
Crazy, crazy, crazy. Yeah, as everyone knows, I am the executive director of the most important conservative movement in America, the New Federalist Alliance. Uh, and it is ambitious, and because of that, I am working my ass off. Um, so, doing a lot of practicing what I preach, reaching out to some nonprofits and some charities and organizations that do ground level conservative work in local communities, and I'm trying to build rapport with them and learn about what they do, so that when we are up and rolling, one of the big things that the New Federalist Alliance is going to do, the reason it's an alliance, is we're going to connect you to your passions. We're going to link you up with these groups that do this work and the things that you are interested in. And so um, I'm making those relationships and digging into those groups right now and organizing that. I'm also plugging in our community, investing in our community, practicing what we preach here. Last night, I was able to hang out with the Athens Limestone's Republican Women Lincoln Reagan dinner. They held this big dinner there, and there were a lot of government involved people in attendance. Some uh, representatives, some council members, some county commissioners, and also our Secretary of State for the state of Alabama, Wes Allen. And so I got to talk with him about what this movement is doing, about what we're up to, and he was excited. He thought it was awesome, and he wants me to keep him informed. And so he's wants to help where he can. And so that's what I talk about when I'm saying, when you just show up to things and you just plug in and just show up, opportunities will present themselves for you to get plugged in. And this is just more proof of that. And so it was an honor to be invited to hang out with them. Those women are doing amazing work in this community. Matter of fact, the women in the GOP, frankly, are doing more work than the men are. They're showing up for the school systems and the libraries and uh, the terrible counseling that's going on, DEI counseling that's being shoved through to our children. They're fighting for women being protected in sports. So the women in the GOP right now are doing amazing things. If you want to be on the front lines of what's happening, uh, get to know your local Republican women's chapter. They bring in great speakers every week. You can meet them and get involved. It's another avenue for people to plug in, and that was a great experience for us last night.
Yeah.
Oh,
Nice.
and Tuesday, I have to put this out. Tuesday night, everyone needs to be on X at 8 o'clock. we Eastern, so it's 7 here for those of us in Rio Linda. Um, so yeah, so chasing bugs around. um, but yeah, we're doing the first ever money bomb for the New Federalist Alliance, and we're blessed to have Daniel Horowitz joining us, backing us in this effort. He is doing amazing work on the state level Freedom Caucus initiative. We all love what the Freedom Caucus is doing for conservatives in DC. They are the vanguard protecting conservatism there. Um, and they were one of the only organizations to stand up to Trump in his first term on various things like healthcare and gun control. They were the ones that pushed back on that and got that protected. And so that was beautiful. We're seeing that at the state level through what Daniel Horowitz is doing. With the New Federalist Alliance lining up with that, we're going to be able to support those efforts and things. Make that long story short, Tuesday night, you are going to be introduced to the whole plan for what the New Federalist Alliance is, what it's about, how we're going to accomplish this insanely ambitious project. Um, and we're going to need to raise about $10,000 to launch our first chapter. Each chapter that we launch is going to cost us between $5,000 and $10,000 because we're going to do a rally. We're going to bring in speakers. We're going to bring in local representatives. We're going to bring in charities and so on. And so it's just going to snowball. And we need to rent venues, and we have a technology package that we deliver and train to the chapter leaders. And so it's a big event. And so this first money bomb is going to help go towards launching our first chapter. And where that's going to be and when it's going to be will be announced Tuesday night. So you won't want to miss out on that. So everyone wants to learn about this and find out what's going on and how you can be involved. Go ahead, tune in on X at 8 o'clock. There will be a whole space on it. Also, swing by newfederalistalliance.com and register there. You will be kept up to date with what's happening. And that's Mark's life in a nutshell.
Nice.
All
Well,
right.
on that note, I think we are going to call it an episode, and we will see you guys Tuesday. And we plan on releasing Frost's first episode of the Caldwell Show later today, and I will release this episode when I finish editing everything. But yeah, see you guys next week.
All right. See
All
y'all.
right.